Thank you, Charles, for the great introduction, and Vandana for putting this on. And also, I mean, UCLA is so fortunate to have folks like Jim Easton and John Anderson who've donated so graciously to the school and really benefit us all with this great program, and also a great dean like Dean Olean. Well, as Charles said, I run Parsons Corporation. For those of you that don't know Parsons, we are headquartered in Pasadena. We're about probably pushing $4 billion in revenue now, and that equates to about $8 to $9 billion worth of projects that we execute, because not all of our revenues are consolidated in our balance sheet for those of you that are into GAAP financials. Work around the globe, have employees that speak 78 different languages. We're operating in something like 36 different countries. And all the projects we do, one of our criteria is they have to be technically complex. As with a group like ours, one of the things we don't do well are simple things. In fact, with a culture like ours, we'll take the simple, the mundane, and we'll so overly complicate it to make it feel comfortable to us, we'll either lose money or greatly cost the client a lot more money. So we focus on what we do well, and that's technically complex projects and programs. So what I want to do is kind of divide up my talk this evening into kind of three components. A little bit about my background. I think we're all products of our environment, and we're all products of what we've learned. So I give you a little perspective of why I'm going to say the things I say. And then a little bit about what I've taken away from the first, say, 10, 15 years of my career, which then really resulted in my leadership style, and that's really the last part. So let me start off. First of all, I am a native Californian. I grew up in Northern California on a rice farm, and went to college. I was really kind of get a 4-year sabbatical before I went back and ran the rice farm. And my junior year of college, got a call from my father that said that rice farming had changed irrevocably and permanently and would never be as profitable again for the intermediate farm. And the farm I came from was about 1,000 acres in Northern California. So he said I was going to have to get a job. And that really wasn't in my life plan. So after several weeks of trying to drown my sorrows, I went back on campus. This was at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo at the time, and they used to bring companies in to give talks. And this company came in and had this great film called Challenge of the Arctic, and I thought, well, that sounds cool. And as it turned out, it was a promotional film for Parsons Corporation, and they were talking about how they, working with British Petroleum and ARCO and others, had tackled many of the challenges of developing oil and gas infrastructure in a North Slope in an environmentally sensitive way. And it was very interesting. They were developing these modules, we call them, process modules, that weigh about 200 tons. They were developed in the contiguous 48 states, put on barges, and then lined up waiting for the ice to melt with icebreakers to charge up to the North Slope, get unloaded, and get back out of there before it froze up. Now, we unloaded these things on specially designed crawlers that then went across these special ice roads we made. You think of ice trucking, but this is ice trucking at about a quarter mile an hour. And we dropped these modules to plus or minus 1/10 of an inch in 3 dimensions. And so I said, that sounds something interesting to me. So I was very fortunate, offered a job at Parsons, started off as an associate engineer. So other than our original founder, Ralph Parsons, I'm the first chairman and CEO who started off on the very lowest level of the organization. And our founder didn't really do that. But he did start off with only 11 people. So Parsons' background is what we call first-of-a-kind, one-of-a-kind projects. My engineering degree was a very generalist program. I was very fortunate in that I got to learn some architecture, civil, mechanical, electrical, instrumentation controls, plumbing and piping systems, HVAC, heating, ventilating, and air conditioning for non-engineers, welding, and things like that. So I had a very, very broad background, but not very deep in any one subject. And when I started with Parsons, I immediately went into the nuclear program. Worked on nuclear fuel reprocessing, very high-tech programs, oil and gas, a lot of overseas programs. So again, I kind of worked in several industries. Again, not very deep in any one business. This is a theme you're going to hear from me. And it's just the way the cards were dealt to me. So one of the things about having a broad engineering degree and working in a broad series of markets is that you find that you really kind of come to the point where your value really isn't in your technical knowledge. Your value is understanding the technical process, but now it's can you bring technical teams together to achieve goals and objectives. And that happened to be where my strength lied, but what I lacked was a business acumen. And I was very fortunate to apply here to UCLA and was enrolled in the fully employed program, went through and got my MBA in finance and marketing. So again, an inability to focus perhaps, maybe I'm a little ADHD, but it broadened out my technical background with a broad business background. And what I learned about UCLA, which is phenomenal, I talked to folks from other MBA programs. I'm always impressed with the UCLA approach. One, it was an entrepreneurial approach. It was case study oriented, which most business classes are. And I was talking earlier today about, I don't know if any of you have had Bill Cockrum's classes, one I'll never forget. I wouldn't call it brutal, but it's very, feedback is instantaneous, I thought, because you're basically presenting to a group of your competitors your ideas, and it's to their benefit to not judge you too well, because their grade's going to be better. On the other hand, they know you're going to have a vote coming back. So it taught you, one, great presentation skills in a tough environment, and that's, I thought, always benefited me in my career. They also did a good job of balancing quantitative and qualitative skills. And I know when I was in the program, I kept thinking, what in the world is this class going to do for me? Now, let's get into the math, let's get into the technical stuff where I can crank some calculations. As life has gone on, it's probably been more the qualitative classes at UCLA that have been such a big benefit to me, as much or more than the quantitative classes. So anyway, with this now background, and by this time I had moved, I was living in Charlotte, North Carolina, gone back to take over, almost right upon my graduation from UCLA, I took over a multi-billion-dollar program management assignment for Department of Energy at Savannah Riverside, and we ran out of Charlotte. And I was there, and I ran across this group of individuals who were just phenomenal, small project people. I mean, they were running projects that were billions of dollars a year, but there were thousands of jobs they were executing simultaneously. And I said, I've never seen this anywhere in our industry. This has got to be a skill set that's differentiated that we can use to our advantage. So we took this, and I wrote a business plan to enter what I call dirt-averse industries. And it was pharma bio, semiconductors, and telecom. And this was back in the early to mid-90s. And so happened to hit the telecom bubble just right. That was luck. And the reason we picked dirt-averse is we had a group that really understood regulatory environment. So you have things like FDA and the Public Utilities Commission's impact on telecom. So we knew how to operate in a very rigid environment. And we knew all of those markets had very high barriers to entry. No pharmaceutical firm is just going to hire anybody to go design their $750 million to $1 billion plant. So we knew once we got in, we were in. And we had a limited, very competent competition. And I'd convinced I thought I'd convinced our board and our CEO at the time to back this program for a long time. Well, what I got was, here's your budget for the year, here's your overhead, here's your net operating income. You make this goal, you can continue your little escapade. If you don't make that goal, sit down, shut up, and go run your program over there again. So, okay, I'll take that challenge. I kind of understood where I stand, and generally that's always a good place to stand. So that unit, that little idea became what we call parcom. It's 25% of our corporation now. It's a little over $1 billion in revenue, about 3,000 people. Operates in those businesses plus a few other, and it's our incubator for non-government commercial technology programs. So after running that for 5 years, I was then asked to take on the role of CFO and treasurer, and then later CEO, and then finally chairman as well. So that's where we stand today. So that's my background, a little context. So what did I learn from all this? And I will say, I guess having read Black Swan, we know that generalities and averages are dangerous things to use. However, I still find them useful, so I'm going to make some generalities of what I learned of working in a technical workforce. One, many technically gifted individuals avoid conflict. And when you think of technical programs, they have technology that perhaps is not totally ready for prime time. They have scopes of work that are migrating. They have very tight budgets, and time to market is always in essence. So if you cannot communicate clearly and concisely and quickly, you're doomed. Oftentimes what you need to communicate are performance issues. That often results in conflict. And, I think there's a lot of people who think, well, if I can just work a little harder, if I just keep this, I won't get yelled at, they won't shoot the messenger because I'm not going to bring the message forward. And what I found was, we need to get teams to communicate and be conflict-oriented, embrace conflict, not yelling and screaming, but be able to embrace the bearing of bad news and other things that lead to conflict. Also, I found that engineers and scientists that I work with tend to be, their risk aversion is indirectly proportional to their personal involvement and commitment to a technology. So when you look at the technologies that they're inherently working on, they see all the promise, all the positives generally, all the future market potential, why it should receive more funding, why it should receive more folks. Now, on the other hand, when they look at everybody else's technologies, they see all the inherent risks, all the pitfalls, and all the shortcomings. It's not necessarily balanced, but it's useful. It's a useful tool. And so one takeaway from that was when you're going to have someone do risk management on a technology, get someone from another project to do it because they'll identify all the risks much more readily than the folks who are from that particular technology. Technology organizations, I found, work best with very systematic approaches to business. First of all, engineers and scientists are educated to be very systematic, so it's a warm, fuzzy feeling, so to speak. But inconsistent messages and leadership tend to demoralize technology teams that I have found. And technology itself can be very fragile. And you're never quite sure if you're dealing with tomorrow's great idea or you just have an idea that's really on life support. And making that decision as to when to stop, when to kill the investment, when to move on with life, or when to keep it going forward is a tough call. And the only way that I've found to get there is through a systematic approach of risk identification, risk management, and evaluation by a group of people who all have a common goal and vision. So consistent objectives and processes help in really separating the developing from the terminal. Also learn you've got to know your customer. Every technology invented in a vacuum rarely works. You can have the greatest idea in the world, but if you don't have customers that are willing to buy it, you don't understand the distribution channels, you'll never get to market. Now, having said that, for those of you, if anybody has read, Clayton Christensen had a great book years ago called Innovator's Dilemma. And in that, he gave a lot of case studies. And a lot of it, what it has to do with is why innovators will have a great technology, but struggle with the next generation. And oftentimes, it's folks with who come and attack that technology because the innovator doesn't want to, once they're a market leader, they don't want to give up their market share. And they don't want to start eating their own young, so to speak. So what Clayton Christensen pointed out, those customers aren't always right either. And he talked about the steam locomotive. And back in the days of steam locomotives, those folks that made them, like Cyrus McCormick and others, and said, hey, we could get into this diesel locomotive business. And the locomotive, the railroad firm said, no, we don't want that. It's smelly, it's slow, it doesn't have any power, they're ugly looking. We want the graceful, big steam locomotives. So a lot of these companies didn't embrace diesel. Well, pretty soon diesel was good enough. And then those same clients had to go back to those manufacturers and said, I love you like a brother. I told you I was never going to buy diesel, but they're so cheap and they're good enough. And I'm sorry, we're not buying any more of your locomotives anymore. So the takeaway from that is, if you're going to back a technology, test it with your customers. Your customers may give you negative feedback, but if they do and you go forward, you better know where you're going to sell it and what the value proposition is. A couple other takeaways. Clear vision. Where is an organization going and what's the mission? What differentiates you from your competitors and what's your value proposition to your customer? A realistic assessment of your firm's core capabilities. I said one of the things that I did when I became CEO is immediately killed anything that we were doing that smacked of low-tech and commodity service. We don't do that well. I mean, if the world goes totally commodity, we'll be out of business. But that's not what we do. And at the end of the day, technology service companies are all about people. But it's not just hiring people. It's the processes that you have, that they work to, and the technologies they employ, and those technologies that you own that they can employ for their customers. And at the end of the day, every company needs a very solid base of values. So, based on all that, what leadership style did I develop? Very early on, I used a term that I had gotten from, actually I got it from the Rocky Horror Picture Show, but it goes back earlier than that to Charles Atlas made this famous dynamic tension. You know, and dynamic tension and the Rocky Horror Picture Show was really all about creating opposing forces that are dynamic opposing forces. So everything in our organization I try to set up in dynamic tension. Let me give you an example of what I mean by that. And the key theory here is that if I can get two people discerning and arguing from different angles a key issue and topic we have, that's the best possible process I can come up with that we're going to get the right answer. Because we don't want groupthink. I would say that when we can get forceful opposing thoughts, belief, and even design our organization to be in tension, to approach problems from different perspectives, and then here's the key, passionately achieve consensus. Now, passionately achieving consensus can sound a lot like arguing, but it's really a much more complex process than that. This passionate consensus building, for those who join us, I say we're kind of a tough love organization because we can look a little rough around the edges at times, maybe a little coarse, but when implemented, it is a very powerful tool. Let me give you one example of how this works. When we go after a sales process, so we're going to go after a big multi-billion-dollar project. We'll identify a sales lead. Now that sales lead is incentivized to, one, get the biggest possible gross margin that he or she can possibly argue associated with that project. For two reasons. One, it's going to get more attention on the CEO's screen, our board of directors screen, senior management will get more resources thrown on it. And two, it's going to help his pocketbook. As we win it, we incentivize our sales folks on the amount of gross margin that's in the sale. Not when it's converted, the day we sell it, that's when we calculate the bonus. However, upon identification of the prospect, we immediately couple him or her with our project manager. Now, our project manager is incentivized based on how much of that gross profit in the sale they can convert to actual gross profit. So they're incentivized to have the lowest possible margin in the sale. So immediately you have conflict. Immediately the salesperson is going, this job is so easy to make money on, anybody could do it, I can't believe it, our competitors will all have twice as much margin. The project manager is going, are you kidding me? This job's got so much contractual risk, this client never pays on time, or we're not good in that geography. And so this tension ultimately gets us to the best possible, what we would call gross profit sold number we can possibly achieve through that tension. And it works wonders. We now know with a fair degree of certainty we're going to have a good number go into our backlog, which goes into the valuation of our company. We've got a salesperson that's not getting overly enriched by goosing up the gross margin on the sale. We've got a project manager that had an overly low target, and things work out pretty well. So that's an example of how dynamic tension works in practicality. I also talked about establishing a clear vision. And one of the things, I guess this is kind of stealing a little bit from Jack Welch, where he said, we don't want to be in a market if we can't lead it. Well, our goal is that we kind of jokingly use is global market domination. If we can't at least see the path to global market domination in every niche we're in, then we get out of the niche. Because that means that, although we'll probably never achieve it, and by achieving that means worldwide global market share leader, clearly margin leader, repeatable business, best reputation, even if we don't get there, if we see a path to getting there, we will do very well. But if we can't even see a path to get there, we're already eating too much dust. We're too far back in the pack. And then I mentioned earlier about setting immutable core values. So when I took over, I said it's very defined core values. And to me, core values are more than words on a paper. We actually incentivize all our management against core values. We have metrics we track. We have whole training programs. And our core values are very simple. There's only 6 of them. Safety, very simple. Everybody comes, our goal is 1, all accidents are avoidable. And everybody associated with our job, from the general public, customer, ourselves, our subs, goes home safely every day. Very simple concept, and you'd be just surprised how difficult it is. However, our statistics, our number of recordable injuries in the last 5 years is 10% of what it was 5 years ago, just by establishing the core value and focusing on it. Quality. And this is pretty simple. Give every customer exactly what they ask for. No more, no less. No more, we're overcharging or cutting into our margins. We give less, we have an unsatisfied customer. Give everybody what they ask for and make sure that we mutually understand what is wanted. Integrity. We will operate with the highest of integrity. Diversity. Here's an interesting metric. Our goal is to diversify our workforce, obviously by gender, by race, by country of origin. Any measure you can come up with, our goal is to diversify. However, we also measure with this metric the diversification of our business. We want to diversify our contracts between lump sum, cost reimbursable, guaranteed max. Diversify our customer base so we don't have any one customer with too much concentration. We want to diversify our geography, where we're operating, so we're not tied to any one economy. We want to diversify the markets we operate in. And lastly, we want to diversify the services we offer. Everything from front-end consulting all the way through operating contracts. So we have a contract that was announced here recently. We won. It's a $1.4 billion contract in Houston. That's the capital cost. That's part of the cost. And in this job, we're designing. We're going to be building this metro transit system in Houston. We're a partner in providing of the rolling stock, all the cars, and then we'll be the 35-year operator of this transit system on an outsourced basis for the city with certain performance parameters. That, to us, is the perfect job for us, and it takes in everything that we do, and it gives us a long flow cash stream, 35 years in that case. So we're on the homeward stretch here, gang. So that in a nutshell is the management style. Dynamic tension, clear focus on people, process, technology, and a systematic approach to business. And what does it support? It supports really confronting issues early on. And I always tell folks, we're much better off following Smokey the Bear and identifying fires before they begin to flame than we are following the fine wine scenario. Just let it mellow with age. That does not work in our business. Free and open communications are absolutely essential, where everyone's voice and opinion is heard. And we used to say that everybody's got the BS flag. And whether it's the chairman or one of our youngest engineers, everybody has the right to say, that's BS, I don't buy that, let's go back. So that's kind of the way our executive committees are run. Very open, free-flowing, I wouldn't say aggressive, but certainly dynamic interchange. Trust is established when the messenger is not shot. And you have to be able to reward the folks who come forward with the bad news so that you can take action early enough and prevent a bad news from becoming worse. The groupthink is avoided, and the less obvious solutions are less likely to be overlooked. I can't say that we'll always get the best solution, but I know the less obvious solutions are less likely overlooked now than they used to be. This style and approach may not work for all. It certainly worked for me in my career. And that's really all I had to say today. So with that, I'd like to open up to any questions anyone might have.
Thank you very much indeed. We do have a microphone here for questions. I'd ask people who would like to ask a question if they could come forward to the microphone. I'd like to ask one question at least to start off while people come to the front. One of the things you mentioned is that you found that the people with a technical background find it very difficult to embrace conflict. can you give an example of how you've been able to overcome that?
Well, one of the ways, I think, again, it's the culture. If your culture that you have is kind of based on conflict, not aggressive, negative conflict, not degrading conflict, but challenging conflict, people tend to come out of their shell and do it. And they come out of their shell when they realize, again, the messenger's not shot. But and I think part of that is that I think a lot of technical folks, why they went into technical degrees and what they're taught is to fully embrace thoughts, concepts, ideas, figures. It's not human interaction. And so the one thing that we always look for technical folks to get hopefully the benefit out of an MBA, especially working in a case study environment, is the ability to communicate, work in a group, human interrelations, and in this whole ability to resolve conflict, create and resolve conflict.
Because we have a lot of technical people in the audience. So I know technical people also tend to be shy in terms of coming forward and actually asking questions. Another thing I wanted to ask you was, you've made a lot of decisions since becoming the CEO at Parsons, and even before that. What would you say was the most difficult decision you've had to make, and how did you make that?
Well, I think the most difficult decision that I've ever made in my career, and probably had to make it more than I ever wanted to, was whenever you have to lay someone off and terminate an individual. That is always the toughest thing to do. Now, since becoming chairman and CEO, I haven't had to do that yet. But I'm sure that day will come, and that's always the toughest decision I think anybody has to make.
Do you have any advice for people on how to make that?
Be as compassionate as possible. Don't hesitate. When it's there, do it and move on. The more you stew about it, the worse it becomes for you and the other individual.
Dollar come does it.
We're a little more compassionate than you're fired on TV.
Hi. You had an example about dynamic tension for actually increasing the profit margin or profits. I wanted to ask you, do you have any concepts or ideas about how that can be applied to executive compensation packages to increase or incentivize your executives to work harder?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Like I said, we really start with our BD and our PMs, but really that goes through, that thought process is pervasive throughout all our comp plans. So there's always a little bit of tension everywhere, and we tend to put groups and this sounds kind of inconsistent, but on the one hand we're pushing a concept, we have one Parsons, everybody working together as a team. But when it comes to individual performance goals, we tend to create a little bit of tension between groups and departments and departments, which would be an overhead function, versus, say, a division, which is a profit-making function, to kind of keep checks and balances in place. And that role is pervasive throughout all our comp plans.
If you can line up with that.
Hi, I'm a UCLA MBA alumni and a former Parsons employee. And I have 3 questions, if that's okay. First, could you describe the other business units that Parsons is structured in? Secondly, you talk about your management style within Parsons. Would you want to talk about your management style and partnering with outside organizations on mega projects? And thirdly, could you talk about the future of energy and what Parsons' role is going to be with our efforts to change our energy mix?
Okay. Parsons is organized into, we're a market-based organization, so our leaders, our sector leaders, division leaders, global business unit presidents, have global businesses and not geographic businesses. So we have 4 global business units: transportation, which is pretty much every mode you can think of: bridge, tunnel, aviation, transit system, road, highway, rail systems, and everything from planning and concepts through design, construction, operations, and maintenance. We have a water group that is, again, water and wastewater, conveyance and transmission, storage and treatment. We have a federal government program that has really focused a lot on core technology we have. Like we own most of the patents that have to do with chemical munition disposal. So things like mustard gas and VX that are spread around the world, we own most of the processes to neutralize those into non-hazardous waste products. We also do work for folks like the Postal Service. Department of Energy is a big customer of ours in developing alternative energies, working at the National Engineering Technology Lab where we're one of the base operators. And do, in fact, international work for the U.S. government. And then lastly, parcom, which is the unit I described as our commercial work. So that was question one. Question two is, how do we bring our management style to our partners? And one of the things you do in a business like ours, when we're going after, say, a multi-billion-dollar lump sum turnkey project, and oftentimes what we get is a performance specification from a customer. Let's say one of the ones we just recently did is the province of Montreal wants to build a new ring road around Montreal. And we have a performance spec. We want the road to go here. We want to be able to pass this much traffic. We don't want any queues over so many minutes in duration during rush hour, and here's how much traffic's going to go on. Give us a bid to do that road in competition with every other leader in that kind of a business. So there's huge amounts of risk in that. The biggest risk is, will our solution work? Do we understand the permitting process in Montreal? In this case, can we speak French fluently enough to get things permitted? And have we estimated the job correctly? So to defray that risk, we team. And we each put independent teams on the design, critiquing each other. We put independent teams on the construction to come up with unique estimates and arguing it all out. So when we're all said and done, we feel like, well, okay, we've defrayed our risk. We're not 100% owner of this joint venture. We're maybe a 33% owner. Plus, we have two other equal partners with as much expertise as we do coming up with a solution. Together, we'll have a solution that can field. Because you got to remember one thing I didn't say early on. For a technology business, engineering construction business is probably the lowest margin in technology business you can get into. But when you're working on a multi-billion-dollar project and your net margin is going to be down in the 5, 6, 7%, that does not leave a lot of margin for error. So again, I would argue that our dynamic tension approach of really, not keeping issues hidden, resolving these issues, talking these issues to our partner results in a better partnering approach. Our goal is to be a great partner. Your last was on energy. Where is energy going? I think that was in relation to how we see energy going and what our role will be in that. Well, for those of you who don't know, we sold our energy and chemicals business several years ago to a group out of Australia called Worley Group. In 1984, Parsons Corp was on a New York Stock Exchange and was the subject of a foreign hostile takeover. And to prevent that takeover, the management team did an LBO and leveraged ourselves up to our eyeballs and bought all our stock at a 25% premium off the New York Stock Exchange and went private. And we went private in a model that's called an ESOP, an employee stock ownership plan. So we are a 100% ESOP. So every year we distribute shares to our current employees as a percent of their wage base. However many shares we have to allocate, they just go out. Now, that stops at a certain salary level so that the top executives of the corporation don't continue to get more shares at a limit above what the employees will get. In fact, if the IRS actually mandates limits. So our stock is very distributed. No stock owner in Parsons is more than like a 0.5% owner of our stock. There are some who would say Lenin and Stalin would be very proud. It's a very socialistic program. Certainly not the model to do the IPO and get rich quick. But it's been a very good program. We also have very low turnover, generally speaking. A lot of our folks, I've worked with the company almost 30 years. A lot of our folks have been with the company 30, 35 years. Not uncommon. Well, when you think about it, we're basically then a retirement fund. We're kind of like a little mini CalPERS, but without that many folks contributing, and we don't have such a long period to pay out. So our goal is to create an investment return that's very stable year in, year out. So the oil and gas business, the energy business in general, for those of you who follow that, it's a very up and down business. I mean, it goes rifling up. Right now it's coming off one of the highest peaks in the history of that business. But when the market turns, and it just has to turn slightly where the balance of power shifts from the service providers like ourselves, boy, the profit margins turn on a dime because the customers will come in, renegotiate contracts, take the margins out, push the risk to the suppliers, and most firms in that business, you end up losing a lot of money during the down years when you're in the peak. That's totally inconsistent with our investment advice, so we sold that business. So we're not going to get back into that business. Having said that, there are niches of all energy business that fit into firms like ours. So like in the oil and gas business, there's big infrastructure developments. Right now we're doing several $1 billion of infrastructure development in Angola for a liquefied natural gas plant. Angola's got a very unique approach. What they want to do is rather than come in, build a plant, and all these expatriates come in, build it and leave, and the local Angolan community gets nothing, what Angola wants to do is to build a city. Build churches and hospitals and telephone systems and an airport and roads and highways and bridges. And so when all of the expatriates leave when the plant's built, now this local Angola area gets a community to live in, and the folks can come in and move in there. We're doing the same thing in Papua New Guinea. And these are great infrastructure jobs, the kind of work we do. That's one area we're working. The other area we're working is in the area of new energy development. We want technology is going to be commercialized by Fortune 500 companies or international equipments or government state-owned entities. We also generally don't work well with speculative developers because we're looking for a customer who's going to be involved with the technology for years to come, interested in long-term operations and maintenance, and so those technologies. So generally, solar is an area we're starting to get into a little bit because we see the investment vehicle changing. Ethanol is not something we've ever touched intentionally. Wind, we see a future in, and in hydro, which is not really alternative energy, but we see a big resurgence in hydro with folks. Does that answer your 3 questions? Perfect. I even remembered them.
Hi, I'm a current executive MBA student at Harrington, and I have 2 questions. One is, are there any programs currently at Parsons for developing their technical leaders into management leaders, and if so, what are they? And 2, kind of a follow-up on the previous question is, what measures is Parsons taking to implement sustainability on their infrastructure projects worldwide?
Okay, that's good. We have a whole broad spectrum of programs, from leadership programs. One, the senior corporate executives teach a class once a month called our leadership development class, and we bring in employees, every new hire employee, a lot of employees from around the corporate. Our goal is to get every employee who supervises at least 2 people in, and our senior executives teach them everything about our core values, how ESOP works, how we approach our markets, our ethics program, etc. In addition to that, we have a thing called Leadership Council, where we pick some of our younger employees, and they serve for 2.5 years in Leadership Council, a group of 16, and they come and present to our executive committee meetings and occasionally to our board. We'll give them topics that we want reviewed, and we expect them to go out and do research. In addition to their day job, if they're going to volunteer for Leadership Council, they're going to be putting in a lot of nights and weekends for about a 2-year period doing research projects on management and business cases that they can present to our executive committee. We also have a global talent initiative where we're working to develop our talent around the globe, break down the barriers working between groups, really instill career path mentoring, technology leadership development, and identifying those employees who want to move into management versus technical parallel career path, and then getting them into the area of stretch assignments, look at MBAs and other sorts of additional education programs. And then we have Parsons University, which is our own set of online and training. One of the unique things we did is we have actually a kind of a ladder we created. That if you're going to move into management, the path to do it in our organization is you're probably going to come from technical background, probably engineering. Not all of them do, but most do. But you could come from project controls or from finance or some other area. You'll ultimately move into project management. And whether into big deputy project manager on a big program or small projects, move to large projects. After you learn project management, because we say that's our core skill, we then send you for a tour of duty in sales. You have to learn the sales side of the model. You can't just be an ops P&L person if you're going to succeed in leadership. You have to learn how to grow in our business. From that, you move into sector management, which is running a fairly small, and it could be a $500 million a year organization. From that into division management, global business unit president, and from there, almost anything in corporate would be an open career path for you. Your last question was sustainability, right? Our sustainability program really has two components, internal and external. So internal, we've embraced sustainability as a core value. Our goal is to lower our carbon footprint 10% annually. We do that through things like, all of our remotely accessed printers, we converted to duplex printing, print on both sides. Sustainability program is a great program for two reasons. One, our goal is to do what's right, to try to make the environment better for our future generations than we found it, and to conserve the best way we can those natural resources that we all know are limited. However, within that, what we also found, we didn't go into sustainability, but what we found is sustainability is a great cost-saving thing. We started going to duplex printing. Next thing you know, we're saving $250,000 a year in paper and ink. Well, not so much ink, but paper. We started locating all of our offices near mass transit systems, near bike routes. All of a sudden we found out we didn't have to have as many parking spaces. We converted all our lighting to low energy lighting uses. Our electrical bill's gone down. We converted all our HVAC systems, or still converting many of them to high efficiency systems. Again, our electrical usage has gone down. We also consult with all our customers in sustainability. Now, not every customer is going to be interested in a sustainability program, but what we tell our folks, it's our duty to at least let them know what the implications are of their decisions from a sustainability perspective. And if they're doing something that is not sustainable, then it's our duty to let them know. Ultimately, they're our customer. Ultimately, they're paying the bill. Ultimately, we're going to do what they want to have done, but we feel like we've done our duty. We've consulted with them. We also will partner with our clients in offset programs, whether it's planting trees to replace carbon that we consume or other programs like that. And then we're a big environmental contractor, so in the case of environmental remediation and clean buildings and things like that, that's a big part of our business.
Chuck, thank you for sharing your experiences with us. I've got two questions.
Well, you guys are multiple questions, man. You're straining me.
First question is, where do you think the future of construction management and program management lies when it seems as though the market is tending to shift towards a more general contracting, hard bid approach? Then the second question would be, what do you see as an emerging market in this economy which Parsons is positioned to become a leader in, which you might not currently have a presence?
Okay. Well, program. There's always going to be a role for program management, but it may move from market sector and location, and I think there's no question that program management is really to go into a customer. A great example is healthcare. There are many, many hospitals around the world who are now embarking upon major expansion programs. There's clearly not enough beds in this country. When you look at the demographics of the aging of America or Western Europe or Asia, and you look upon the days of hospital stay by age, it's a line that just goes along at 0 until you reach like 65, and it starts creeping at 1, 2, 5, 10. And you overlay that with the baby boom, and we need a lot more beds in this country. No question about it. So now you're a hospital that is a result of insurance changes and so forth back in the early 90s. One of the things that we did is reduce hospital stay. Well, that bought the industry about 10 to 15 years of capacity, about 10 years. Well, in that 10 years of capacity, they were able to use their extra capacity, not build anything. Now all of a sudden they come out and they have a major building program. Well, there's nobody left on the hospital staff that knows how to build a hospital. Very few anyway. And this is a pervasive issue. So their solution, well, they can go hire a bunch of people, put on permanent employee to run their program, and then in 3 years when their job is done, lay them all back off again, or they can hire a program or project manager. So that's a great example where program and project management makes a lot of sense. You see it a lot overseas also, countries like the Emirates, The population in the Emirates, I think the indigenous population is like 10 to 15% of the total population. There's just not enough Emiratis to run all these programs, so they outsource via a program management model. So although I think the market will shift, there'll always be program management. Construction management is shifting. And construction management is shifting to more of a risk-based model. So whether it's something they call in our business CM at risk, where basically you become a lump sum firm, but rather than being a hard money bid GC up front, general contractor up front, you work with the designer, you get on board early, you go out for bid in all the projects, and once you get all those bids, now you lock it up on a lump sum deal with the contract. Now your goal is to convert that to a price at the end. In some ways, it's great for customers. It's a pretty low margin business for us, but it's where the market's going. It's something we have to embrace, and we have embraced that. But I do see that as being critical going forward for construction management. That was your two questions, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to limit everybody to one question from here on. Maybe we'll have two more questions, and then we need to, I think, adjourn to the reception.
I'm from the PhD program. I have a question related to your incentives. You said you had a dynamic tension. So on the one hand, you have a salesperson who's compensated, let's say, immediately when the sales is made. But I think the critical part of the business is really execution of the project, which extends over long periods of time. So how do you manage that and ensure that you get the...
It's a very good question. So the project manager, as I said, who is in this dynamic tension with the sales manager, they and their team are incentivized based on a project incentive plan. For every project that we run, there's an incentive plan for meeting a series of things from our safety metrics, the quality and customer satisfaction, and obviously a very big component is the profitability. Now, since some of these programs run over 3 years or 4 years, we probably wouldn't have a very good tenure if we didn't pay anybody for like 3 or 4 years for their bonus program. So we'll go through and annualize that plan, which, albeit gets risky when you have a program that's lump sum and you have a lot of risk that doesn't really find out, where you're going to stand on the risk till the job's all done. But we've found ways through the years of doing that, and we will incentivize those project managers and their teams some percent of that incentive plan each year based on their ability to hit that year's profit targets. The big payout comes when we finally put a bow on the job and it's completely done. But that's how our project managers and then at least 50% of the incentive program of our sector managers, division managers, and GBU presidents are run. So.
One more question, and there'll be more chance for questions outside your...
By the way, those of you who are in the program here, have you found in almost every case study, if you can point to the executive compensation program as a problem, that's a gimme point. Because it's always the executive comp program that's screwed up. I didn't mean to give away a secret,
Hi, my name is Ayin San. I'm a FANMA 2009. Really enjoyed your presentation. I do have two questions. It's hard to give up which one I'm not going to ask here.
Go ahead and ask two, and I'll try to remember them both.
Okay, thank you. The first one is related to transfer from a technical job role to like a business management. I tried unsuccessfully to transfer from quality assurance to business development within the same company and was not successful. So I want to hear your experience and your opinion. How do we do that? Prepare some suggestions. That's the first question. Second question is related to communication skills. You are very good at communication. While you were developing your business skills, like when you were working on your MBA, was there anything specifically you did? Did you do, Toastmaster or some other things to improve your communication skills? And what suggestions do you have for the current MBA students?
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to take the second one first because I've been consistent on this from the beginning. I was not a particularly good speaker or presenter and very uncomfortable. And I think if I can do it, anybody can do it, first of all. So you all ought to feel like, as much as I hack it up, you can at least do as good as I do or better. But there's no question what helped me in mine was the UCLA Anderson School. And it wasn't special classes I took. It was getting up in front of class and presenting case studies and being persuasive and learning and being able to take criticism. I think one of the greatest things you get, at least in the program, the classes I was in, is, a couple of professors would have the students as well, not just give you a grade or thumbs up, thumbs down, but critique you. Get your hands out of your pockets, or you're kind of stammering and stuttering. You're giving me, you're all over the board. Just pick 2 or 3 points and get them across. And those kinds of feedback, you can kind of get your feelings get hurt or whatever, but if you take that and internalize it and realize what they're really doing is helping you, it really helps your ability to make presentation, in my opinion. Moving from, in your case, like how do you move from technical to management? In your case, you're talking about QA to sales. I think one of the things that's also very useful is to do a skills assessment and really look and internally look at what are the skills required to do the job that you're looking at, and what are your strengths and weaknesses as they relate, and do the resulting gap analysis. Not everybody's cut out for every role. That's just the way that is. However, in a thing like business development, that's a pretty broad area. For us, we have in business development, we would have some of our marketing skills. We have the folks that really do a great job of putting together our proposals and the quality, and it's a very important job. We don't sell, we don't get work. And we have externally focused business development people, and those are going to be folks who are good listeners, probably more than anything else. And we've done analysis of this. My perception was, who are our greatest business development folks? The folks who work well with customers on an external basis. Surely it's going to be the gregarious folks that everybody wants to be around. And what we found is that's no correlation to that skill and being an effective business development manager at all. We have very soft-spoken business development managers who, on the surface, I wouldn't think would ever know what was going on because no one would ever talk to them. We have very gregarious business development managers who are the life of the party, and both of them are equally effective. I looked at the amount of gross profit sold that they bring in year out, year in, year out. They're equally effective. So we started peeling back the onion. What is the skill set they had? It was the ability to listen. It was the ability to listen and process, and then be able to convert from that customer's nomenclature to our nomenclature what it was going to take to win this job. And oftentimes being a good listener means you ask the same question 5 different times, 5 different ways. And you keep working that facet, trying to understand what that customer is telling you. And a customer may not be one person. It may be 20 people in an organization. For a multi-billion-dollar job, you need a very rich understanding of what that customer's hot buttons are, what are the issues, what are the challenges, what do they see as important. And that's a skill that clearly differentiates our successful BD managers from our non-successful BD managers. So anyway, it's kind of a roundabout answer to your question, but hopefully that helps.